Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're letting the Zoom chat fill in. Thank you for joining us for another session of Wacom Webinars. Today, we're gonna talk about tips and tricks in creating environment concept art with Jose Vega. We're just gonna wait a few more minutes for the room to fill in. Hi, Jose, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
We're doing well, we hear you.
Awesome.
I am your host, Elizabeth Garcia, social media manager for Wacom. I will be leading this session. It will last around an hour and a half. I will not be saving the questions for last. I will be asking questions throughout. Please use the Q&A feature on Zoom to submit your questions because the chat moves very quickly and I'd like to get to as many questions as possible. We will also be recording this session and sharing it on YouTube later. It's also being broadcasted on Facebook. Hello, Facebook. Thank you for joining us. Send me your questions through the comment section. Our team will send it over to us. Today, we also have a special offer through our friends at B&H. $50 off the Wacom One with the code Wacom Webinar. This is for US customers only. And just to give you a little brief intro, Jose Vega is a senior concept artist for Magic: The Gathering at Wizards of the Coast. He's also a former lead supervisor for Castlevania on Netflix. He has a passion for teaching and sharing his creative knowledge, and also has a YouTube channel that focuses on very simple and quick tutorials on digital art. He's very responsive to his audience and welcomes questions, comments, and feedback. So please go follow him. Jose currently works on a Wacom Cintiq Pro 24, and he works on Blender and 3D Code, which we'll be discussing later. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and there he is. Hi, Jose.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
Thank you. You can begin your session. You can share your screen. For those of us that aren't familiar with your career and what goes into environment concept creation, please give us a brief intro.
Like you said, I am currently working as a senior concept artist in Wizards of the Coast for Magic: The Gathering. Previously to that, I was in the background supervisor lead for Castlevania, the Netflix series. And I did that for about 3 years, a little bit over 3 years. And before that, I was a freelancer concept artist working from Puerto Rico. So, moving back into the timeline, I started my professional journey as a concept artist in pretty around end of 2012. So it's been about, a little bit like 8 years, a little bit over. And the first 5 years, I pretty much did it as a freelancer because I was currently living in Puerto Rico. And so in Puerto Rico, there's not that much of a industry for this, for this category of art. So my main option was to either freelance it or move out of the island and work and find clients like that. So let me share my screen here real quick.
So yes, for everybody who's tuning in, Jose is from Puerto Rico. We do have some Puerto Ricans here in the audience. Welcome everybody, bienvenidos. We also have people from Bulgaria, from Turkey, from Peru, from Montreal, Denmark, Canada. Thank you so much for joining us. We have quite a diverse group in the chat today.
Nice.
Chile, gracias. Thank you so much for being here. Let's see what you're working on. So this is Photoshop that you're working on or that you're opening up. Do you work often in Photoshop?
Yeah, mostly depending on exactly what I'm doing, the majority of the work, I do it in Photoshop. Um, anything from, sketches to ideations, color grading, anything related to the 2D side of things. Um, I do it in Photoshop. And this is usually where it starts. I also do a lot of like notes and a lot of ideation that I happens in my head. I try to put it in the canvas here as well. Um, because of this digital world, it's very rare that I work in a normal, traditional sketchbook because I'm usually most of the time in my computer. So I usually do a lot of my initial thoughts, sketches, and all that inside Photoshop.
Okay, so for those of us, I know that there's a lot of people here watching who know you already, are very familiar. They don't need any introduction. Maybe there's a few environment designers here on the chat as well. But for people who aren't familiar with environment design and environment concept development, this is everything involving the environment, anything from the architecture, the space, the mountains. Can you tell us what else it covers?
Yeah, so it's gonna vary a little bit depending on which industry you're in. So, for example, when I was on Castlevania, that's an animation driven, as an animation industry. You have like video games, movies, other types of games like Magic the Gathering, and you also have animation. And so mainly the core process of designing an environment is very similar throughout all these industry. You have to think about the same things, how the characters are going to interact with environments, the design of the environment per se, the timeline, everything related to the story and what that environment is going to bring to the story. But when you get a little bit more specific, so for example, in animation, you have to think about, what the storyboarders are doing in their storyboards to see how that character is going to move throughout that environment, so you can actually design it in that space. You also have to think about, what sort of props and things the character is going to interact with within the environment, so you can actually design that to fit better that action or that whatever the character is doing with that prop. So in animation, there's a lot to keep in mind with the characters, because they're sort of like the ones driving that scene most of the time in that environment, so you can design it appropriately for that. And there's a lot of things that you can omit as you're designing, because you would never see it, or it would just be mostly like background stuff. But for example, in a game, when you actually have control of the character, where you can look everywhere you want to or you're permitted to, you have to design pretty much everything in that environment, so you can so everything is livable, and the character can actually pass through or interact with, and that sort of thing. For example, now I'm in the world building team for Magic, and there is a little bit different from my previous job, because even though we're still designing worlds and all that, I don't have to worry too much about the animation, or I still need to think about how the characters are going to interact in the world, but in a more bigger scale and larger scale. In animation, it's a little bit more specific and more, close down, zoom in type of thing. But again, the core elements are still present throughout everything. We still got to think about design, how those environments affect the characters, the history about those things, and how we can design those to be a better product.
And thank you so much, Jose. That's really interesting. When you begin concepting, are you given like a storyboards or a brief with descriptors of all of this or a history of everything? Like, what are you working off of? A vision board?
So all those things that you mentioned are usually present. I think it also depends on where you're at. I think it runs a little bit differently. But for example, on Castlevania, you know, the first thing that we get is the script. And that usually tells us, you know, most of the information that we need. And then from there we can, you know, the art director usually takes a look at that first, and then try to blends his or her vision with the writers. And so all that information, that's what we get. And, you know, we use that to create the visuals for that. And there's some things that really, there's some things that are core that will always need to be present, but in my experience, there are some things that, you know, that can still change because of the evolution and progress of the project. But I have had other jobs that is mostly, you know, we need to, you know, build a city, and they give you like, you know, a 2-sentence brief, and then everything else is mostly up to you. And then they'll usually go from there. So I think it's part of also your job to take as much as you can, but, you know, whatever they give you to present visuals that will represent that, and do that in the most efficient way possible. But, you know, it could vary depending on the project and who you're working with as well.
Thank you, Jose.
Excuse me.
No worries. For people watching, wondering,
so
it's available on YouTube later. So if you miss something that Jose said, don't worry, you can watch it essentially this afternoon once we upload it to YouTube, to Wacom's YouTube. Thanks. So what's the first step that someone can take to be an environment designer?
So I think is to understand why you want to be an environment designer. I think, at least to me, that's like the most important, you know, the most important thing, because that's what's going to keep you engaged in the long run. And so I think that would be like the first thing, like why you want to do that. To me, you know, I just love places, right? When I go to a place, whether especially nature, like to me, that's like the most higher experience that I can have, like outside of relationships and stuff. Like, for example, when I go to a trail, or I go to a new, you know, mountain hike, or, you know, a new place where there's like culture, like a different culture or something, you know, there's something so overwhelming and in a good way, and good, that I want to express that or show that in my artwork. And so what I come to find, you know, most characters artists are like, you know, they like to have relationships with people and are people person, so they want to illustrate that in their work. But to me, it's like places. So to me, that would be the first thing. And then after that, to be honest, it's really just putting in the time to understand the tools that you need for that, which is one of the things that I want to talk about. And also to not underestimate the core elements of design, like the, you know, the quote unquote basic stuff, like, you know, perspective and design and color, and you know, how to illustrate moods with different lightings and colors, understanding, you know, types of different architectures, different time frames, and how those affect the characters as well. And so you know, from those three things, you have you have years and years and years to just concentrate on those three things. But I would definitely start with the why, of course.
Awesome. Yeah, guys. So figure out why. If you love places and landscapes and life-changing views as much as Jose, maybe you should consider environment design. Do you think a college education is required to be an environment designer? Do you have to be classically trained,
No,
or is something you can? Okay.
no.
Can you elaborate?
Yes. So, I mean, I say no. I do have a bachelor's on animation, which I've never used because I don't do animation. But there is nothing wrong with having one. It's not really, it's not needed. Like, you know, in a job, like in any job that I've gotten, I've never been asked to hand if I have a, you know, a bachelor's or associate's or a master program. I think that comes down more into like I tried to teach at a university way back on the weekends to do like courses and stuff. And they do ask you because of, it's just part of the law. That's when you will need it. But if you're not interested in that, you know, you don't really need to. However, I mean, there's so much, now that we're talking about education, there's so much resources out there right now that, you know, free, and that are, you know, that they're not classically or officially, like you will get like an actual degree that will teach you so much about the industry and how to do the work that, you know, you can find it like anywhere.
You have a channel,
So
right? You have a channel where you give classes.
yeah, I do like, you know, like little tutorials in there. My first, one of the main reasons why I do it is because like my first, when I was in my late 20s, when I decided to try to be a concept artist, my main source of education was a YouTube channel, and it was the Design Cinema by Feng Zhu. And I would watch those, you know, every single day, night and day, every time I could. And, you know, it was for free. And, you know, YouTube is a great resource for knowledge because, I mean, you don't really need to, you know, for this kind of stuff is, if I want to put a number, is 20% theory and then 80% application practice. And so you just need to know and understand theory wise, you know, what you need to. And then as soon as you're done with that, you just need to get in the computer or the sketchbook or whatever you're using for your tools, and then just practice that over and over and over and over. So a lot of people, I think, get hung up into, you know, taking, you know, hours and hours and hours of classes, but they forget that practice, and they don't put that much emphasis on the practice. And I think that's like 85% of this. And so there's plenty of resources out there for anybody.
Thank you. And do you have, some people here in the audience are wondering if you have any books on the subject that you may recommend. I know there's a lot of online resources, but are there any good books that we can have as reference? Do you know of any?
I'm not really big on books, but I will recommend you, I've read just a few. One of them is the Color and Light book. That is a fantastic book. If you like to actually like read books and, you know, go through those. It's called Color and Light by, yes, by James Gurney, and that's a fantastic book.
But James
any
who?
of
James
the who? James Gurney.
Okay. Take notes.
Yeah. And he
Danny,
has another one.
question right there. Thank you.
He has another book called, I'll tell you right now. Forgot that. I haven't read this one, but I hear it's very good as well. Imaginative Realism is very good as well.
Oh yeah, our friends here at the chat were mentioning that book, yeah. Imaginative Realism. Imaginative. I can't pronounce it. Oh my God, my English is so
imaginative.
Bad. Imaginative. Thank you. Thank you. Well, there you go. For those of us who like to learn more traditionally, check out those books.
Yeah, you can apply these things also digitally, and like if you're also like into like really technical drawings, like the books from Scott Robertson are very good as well. I think he has two so far, three. I'm not really sure, but he has some great books. And also, like I'm a environment person, so I everything I gather reference wise, like instead of I don't buy many books or any at all like right now. I used to, but not anymore. Like if I get like um or if I want to find like really good reference, like I will get like real life stuff. So I will take a look at, nature documentaries. Like if I buy a book about something in specific, like I will buy it about, the real world stuff like nature and or architecture or, stuff like that. So for example, I did a work a while back about um, Japan and um, and some like railroads and sort of like that sort of Japan look. And so I went to like a Japanese store and I bought like a photography book of like Japan that it had like a bunch of real life references that I was just looking for. Um, and that's what I bought, and that's what I use for my inspiration and references and stuff like that. Um, so
Excellent.
yeah, that's what I usually do.
All right, well, let's watch your work. I know you have Photoshop open, and you mentioned you start a lot of your note taking and your concept um, notations on Photoshop. Have you ever
Yes.
used
So,
Studio Paint?
uh
Have you ever used Clip Studio Paint?
sorry. No, but I am actually very tempted to start using it. Actually, I know they did some changes, and a lot of people in the previous job that I had were using it, like especially character artists were using it a lot, and I am very tempted to start trying it. I'm just not sure yet if it's gonna if it does what I need it to do.
Right on. Well, we're very good friends with Clip Studio and we love it.
Um,
We encourage you to try it. But we also love Photoshop. So
nice.
let's see what you do on Photoshop. And what are we looking at right here? This is an environment for
Yeah, this is just a quick mood play. That's what I call a mood play or mood painting, or quick um, quick image just to kind of show the mood um, and the colors and that sort of thing and the ambience of a scene. Um, this is just an example of something that I would like to paint today.
what's
As I'm talking
the
to you
canvas
guys,
size on this?
this is a, let me put it on pixels, 3840 by 1821.
Is that your favorite size to work on or it varies?
For personal work, yes. A lot of my client job, they require specific ratios, so I will work on those if they're specific. But if it's for me, usually it makes it look more cinematic. I can get more of the environment in here in a plate like this. Um, yeah, I usually render things out like this.
Awesome.
But yeah, so I would like to paint one of these today. I did some renders, but first I want to show you a process that I normally try to do on my everyday when I'm working on things when I have the time. And um, usually I do have the time, but sometimes in concept art, you only have like a few days to get something done or a day to get something done. And so you don't have the time, but a lot of my personal work and freelance work that I have usually longer time wise, I'm able to do stuff like this. And this is to create a standard 3D kit based on whatever subject I'm working on. And this specifically one was a personal one, so I had even more time than usual. But something like this, I used to do a lot in Castlevania because it helps a ton with, when I'm working on animation, I have to do 5, 8, 10 paintings done for one specific location. And so again, if I have the time, creating something like this helps me a lot with, like, setting up a shot and finding different camera angles. And I get a lot of information from these models that my time spent in Photoshop painting gets reduced by a lot. And so that means that I can get more paintings done in less amount of time. And I think that's always good when you're in a production. And so this process, I think, is extremely valuable when you're in a production, and the time allows for you to do that. And you don't have to go super detailed with it. Like, you can create something more simple, less model and less textured, and it still serves the purpose. But it is something that, as an environment artist, it does help a ton to speed up and be more efficient about your process.
Somebody earlier was asking about how detailed you get when you present to a client. Is this what you're showing us now? Is this something too detailed for our initial client pitch, or is this something that you expect that level of detail to be in a client presentation?
So it depends on the project. I've shown, let me see if I can show you an example. I have shown clients, one thing that I keep in mind is the time that I have available, right? So for example, if I get a brief, let's say I get a brief this morning and I need to show something by nighttime or by the end of the day, that's like 8-12 hours work. So that's actually that's a pretty good amount of work for me to show something like what you see here on the screen, to create a very simple model, light it up in 3D. I can spend the first half of the day doing that, and then get a nice render. And then, by the end of the day, I could have 1 or 2 paintings like this, and, show that by the end of the day, right? But if they give me like, an hour or 2, then, it's going to be definitely not something, it's probably just going to be like a black and white sketch done in Photoshop or something. Something similar to, let me see if I can, something like this. This is just another version of it, but where I can get done in a few hours, just to sketch it out and do it as fast as possible. So this brings a great conversation, because depending on your client, depending on the time that you have available, depending on the subject matter that you're working on, I personally like to have as many tools available as possible. That way, whenever I get a brief or a project or anything like that, I can take a look at my bag of tools and decide which tools are gonna be the best for me to get it done as fast as possible. And so, to me, it's extremely important to have as many tools as possible, so I can have that freedom to say, okay, in this one I'm going to use 3D, or in this one I'm going to do sculpting, or in this one I'm going to do texturing, or in this one is just just plain old sketching on Photoshop and photo bashing maybe.
When you're
So
applying,
the more tools you have, the more freedom.
the more tools you have, the more freedom. When you're trying to apply texture, what software do you use for 3D assets?
Oh, for the 3D is
do you use Blender?
If I want to, yeah, I use it in Blender, but if I want to be more specific, I do it in Quixel Mixer. So I think this ones I did in Mixer, pretty positive. And so, Quick Submix allows you to bring your own models or create custom, materials for your project and export them and then import them into Blender and all that. So that's another tool, Quick Submixer, that I think is very powerful to use for texturing. There's other software there as well, but that's the one I use.
You before we started the webinar, you had also mentioned 3D code to paint textures. Sophie was asking about that. Do you use 3D code, and for what's your favorite thing to use it for?
Okay, so let's actually jump into 3D code. I can do something in there.
Yeah, I haven't seen anybody work on 3D code in a long time. So let's see it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, I haven't.
Okay, great. So in 3D code, I'm not a super expert in 3D code, and there's probably things that I do wrongly here, but let me change my Wacom here real quick. So I mainly use 3D code for voxel sculpting. And you can start with a sphere or nothing, or a cube or something, depending on what you're going to work on. But let's actually create something here quick that you guys can see. Now, sometimes it crashes, so I apologize if that happens. And you have all these brushes that they do different things depending on what you're trying to accomplish. But let's try to actually just do something here. Let's enable symmetry here. And again, in 3D code, the good thing about the thing that I like about 3D code, or one of the things, is that I don't need to worry too much about perfect geometry or anything like that. I can sort of go past that and concentrate on the creative part of it, just to create things and not worry too much about the technical stuff. And so I could, for example, I'm just gonna create something simple here, but let's say I wanted to create some sort of column here.
I'm reading through your questions on the Q&A, so I haven't forgotten about you guys. I'm just letting Jose roll with his planned class. He did want to show us a few things. People are asking how many years it takes to get to your level, and I don't know how many years you've been working in the industry, Jose.
I mean, I've been working professionally for a little bit over 8 years. But to be honest, that doesn't mean anything. I've known people that have been in the industry for 20 years, and they, their art looks the same since 10 years before that. And I've known people that have been in the industry for 3 years, and they're doing like amazing, things that I can't even think about. So it's really up to the person. Like I really dislike kind of saying, oh, do you need 5 years of full-on practice? Because I mean, you might get it in 3, or you might get it in 2. It might take you 8. It's just you can't really tell.
I agree. Sometimes I see
So,
really young people on the channels, and I see their portfolios, and then I will look at them, and they're in their 20s, and I have no idea how their portfolios are so advanced and so impressive.
Yeah, it's And especially now, the people are starting now, like they have so much resources to learn from, like so accessible, that their growth, it's so much, it could be so much, it has the potential to be so much faster, because there's so much access to knowledge and the technology that we have right now, and and how it's getting better and all that. So like today it's the best day to start if you haven't started, and tomorrow will be the best day, and so on and so forth, because it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah. Do you ever, Jose, do you still sketch in analog, or are you doing everything digitally these days?
I'll say 95% of the time I do it in digital. If I do anything um in like in non-traditional sketchbook, it's mostly for me, just so I can get out of the computer, and like if I go to a trail or something, I just want to sketch something there, um or something, then I would just do
Yeah.
that. But um everything client wise, is I'll definitely keep it digital for sure.
Carl Wiggins is asking, in your experience, Jose, what is the industry standard 3D modeling app that all designers should start their journey with? Which is your favorite? It's a hard question, but if you don't know the answer, I don't know who would.
I mean, the standard is gonna depend on the studio that you're working on. So, for example, I started with well, way back it was like Softimage and 3D Max, but then for the longest time I used Maya. Um, Maya is extremely expensive, and so when Blender came with the version 2.8, I think it was, I decided to try to learn it and see how good it was, because it was getting super hyped, and I was seeing like a lot of cool stuff being done with it. And so I think I bought a course, and I spent 3 weeks, because I needed to go back to Puerto Rico for something medical, and I knew I was gonna spend 3 weeks there without doing anything, like not working or anything. So I was like, I'm gonna spend these 3 weeks just learning Blender, and um, that's what I did, and I fell in love with it. And so I use Blender every single day. Um, but some companies, they use Maya, or whatever they need to use for their pipeline. um when I was in Castlevania, I was using Maya, and then when I started, we didn't have a 3D artist, and whenever we got a 3D artist, he was using Maya. And when I did my change to Blender, then we started using Blender, and um, most of the background artists there use Blender now. um, and it really all depends on what the needs are. Blender is free, um, so that's a good point right there. um, but then again, I think it's really up to the artist, what the artist wants to do, um, and what sort of tools you want to use. um, for example, like you could be using um, ZBrush for sculpting, right? Which you can get the same results as in 3D Code. But personally, I like 3D Code better. But you can use either one, because they're both sculpting softwares.
Yes, ZBrush is excellent. It's very robust. It
Mhm.
intimidates some people, and you were saying that you find 3D code just more straightforward.
Yeah. So, for example, one of the things that I love about 3D Code is the stencils. So, for example, if you know a little bit about 3D, you might know what a displacement map is. And pretty much what that is a image, a black and white image. Let me try to find an example here. Um, it's a black and white image that uses value to determine what things are gonna come up and what things are gonna come down. So for example, the lighter the value, so the closer to white, the higher it's gonna go in the geometry, and the darker it is, the lower it's gonna go. You can always invert that, but that's usually the normal case. So for example, stencils work as a displacement map, very similar. So for example, I got one here that I made in Photoshop, and you can play with designs and whatever you want to create or experiment with. But I find that to create like architectural details and things that are very complex, you can use stencils like this. So for example, I can grab this image and let's go to here. Let's say I want to add some detail here. I'll grab that image and let's not do tiling. And I can just scale this. Let's say I want to place it here. Let's turn on geometry, symmetry.
For those of you who were asking how Jose paints small details earlier, this is a good way.
Yeah, for sculpting, this is the a good way to do it. So I can place it here, and then I can just go, let's go to build. Actually, let's do it this way better. I'll scroll that, and now I get that image sort of put in there. So now that gives me a good amount of detail that I can come back in and then, start detailing and breaking it up a little bit and that sort of thing. So stencils are a great way to, create more complex stuff. Let me see. I think I have an example. Let's see. Let me open another one that could give you an example here.
You know if 3D Code is free? Somebody's asking.
No, it's definitely cheaper than ZBrush, I believe. Way cheaper than ZBrush, which is another reason why I wanted to try it out. It's like, I don't want to say a number, but I think it's like 300, 400 something bucks. Unlike ZBrush, which I think is more, it has a subscription base now. Mm-hmm. Back when I got it, it was definitely cheaper than ZBrush. But here in this kit that I did, you can see some of those stencils uses. Let me turn on the textures here. Sure, it takes a minute or two to load the textures in.
It's okay. Well, it's doing that. You have a big fan here, Jose Iturriaga. He's trying to change careers from exhibit design into environment concept art or background. Do you have any tips for older friends getting into the business?
Same thing I would tell any of my younger friends. Just like, if you're gonna go with it, just do it. There's really not an age thing here. This is not like fighting where it's like a young men's game. This is pretty much a skill-based industry, and so skill-based is only developed by putting in the time over time, and so I will say the same thing. Depending on your case, yeah, it's really never too late. I mean, I started. I see so many artists like in their early 20s, like they haven't reached 25 years old or 27, and they're like working in projects like Marvel and all these big box movies and games and stuff. And I started on my late 20s. I'm 37 now, and I've only been in the industry for since 2012, so like 8, 9 years. And even though I started quote unquote late, it's really not that important. As long as I'm doing the best I can every single day, and like I'm super obsessed by that, then I have nothing to worry about. And I think the hardest part is like at the beginning, like the first 3, maybe 4 years, because that's when you're actually starting out, and if you need money to pay bills, and you're not really living off your art, so you gotta get other jobs. But I went through that. Most artists went through that, and so it's just a matter of sticking with it, believing in that eventually you're gonna get there, and that you actually have a realistic plan with it, because it's not just working on top of work. It's been actually um, decisive and having a clear path and plan on how to get to where you want to be. So those two things are extremely important. But yeah, you can see some examples here of the stencil use. Like all these little details are made by using those stencils. And as you saw, you can just place them super easy and super quick, and you can create really cool stuff with it.
That's really cool. Jose, how do you make sure that things stay, I guess let me rephrase it. How do you measure things to keep them in the right perspective, in the right size to their counterpart in environments? Is there an easy way, or are you just eyeing it?
What do you mean?
How do you measure things to keep them the same size as their counterpart? Like these are all elements of a background. How do you make sure that they are going to be the right sizes when you're drawing them individually without a context? How do you know their sizes?
Oh, so in 3D, it's a lot easier to do. Usually I start my models with a little, actually, let me just open a new one so you can actually see it. I usually start my 3D with human scale, like this. And then I try to build everything based on this scale, right? Like if I'm building a table or a door. But at the same time, a lot of times it really doesn't matter, at least for concept art, because for example, this painting here, like I'll show you what the 3D looks like, which is horrible, but this is what the 3D looks like. And a lot of these elements were not meant to, or were not constructed to be in this scale. But for concept art, it really doesn't matter, because as you're painting it, you're playing with all those, with atmosphere, you're playing with the perspective and pushing things back and forth with ambient and lighting and all that. So to me, when I build stuff in 3D, is mostly as a support thing for my concepts. It's not really the angle. It becomes more of the angle when I want to, like, if I create a kit like this and I want to sell it, for example, which I do. So like I try to keep it as close to that scale as possible. So I got to think about the textures. So for example, like if I move this scale here, let's see. Or if I move it here, I want to ensure if I'm creating a staircase, like I want to ensure that the person is going to be able to actually step. It's not too deep of a step. If I had like a brick texture, like the bricks don't look humongous next to a person, and that sort of thing I usually keep in mind. But I could grab, for example, these asset here, and it's meant to be on this scale based on this figure, but I could bring it to here and make it like a huge wall, and then just construct everything that is going to be bigger in size, but it wasn't meant to be that big, because I know at the end I'm gonna paint it over and fix, quote unquote, that scale on the painting, if it's far away or close by or anything like that. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. I wasn't sure if that's
Yes,
what you meant.
sorry, I was having problems with my words, getting them out. I meant, how do you make them proportioned, or how do you keep them in proportion? Ay, problemas de Spanglish, ya sabes.
Yeah, if you're actually just drawing everything, like you're not doing any 3D or anything, because 3D takes care of your perspective. You don't need to worry about perspective in 3D. But if you're actually just drawing it, like making a perspective grid, it's the way to do it. And if you like, actually, I'll just do a quick. If you don't know, and this is like super basic stuff, but you want to have your horizon line if you want to have a higher horizon line, and I usually do that with these guidelines inside Photoshop, because it goes through the canvas like this, so I can place it anywhere, and then in a new layer I can grab the polygon tool, and I think they changed this on this new version, so let me see if it works here. And I want to do a star shape here, pixels, and I can just click and drag, and it gives me a vanishing point with the grid there that I can just use as perspective for my. Let's say I want another one here, like so. And now I have a 2-point perspective here. And then now I just use the lines as guidelines to draw everything that I need to draw out.
Awesome.
Have
you ever worked, this is a little bit, it's just, I'm only asking this because it's been a repeat question and I'm not sure if you use it or not. Have you used Procreate instead of Photoshop for sketching?
I have my iPad back there. I have used it. I've never used it for client work. I think I'm too dependable on Photoshop and the versatility that it provides me. If I want to photo batch, if I want to, have my system in terms of like painting, that the only thing that I've done on the iPad in Procreate that has any relative part to client work is like, I have an app called MindNode where I put where I do a lot of ideation in terms of like ideas and stuff and how they connect to different elements. I don't like, just sketching. But, right now I use 3D so much in my work because I actually sketch in 3D. So like if I have an idea of something, a lot of times I don't even sketch it out like in Photoshop, like an actual sketch. I just go straight to 3D and I start sketching it out in like simple shapes and moving the camera around, how it works and all that. So a lot of times I'm seeing myself doing that process because I know in the long run it's just gonna help me better if I have a 3D that I can just move around and find different angles and construct things and that sort of thing. So yeah.
Thank you.
So this is one of the things that I find myself doing a lot, just a 3D kit, building things. And another good thing about this is like, there's so much, once you start building up your library in 3D, like at your 3D library, like there is a lot of reuse that you can use for other future projects that you might be working on, and you already have the majority of the work done. You might want to change textures and shapes and ratios and sizes and all that, but you have a lot of it already made, and so the process already takes a leap even faster to get it done faster. So that's another great thing about having a 3D library where you can just pull things from and
And
construct things.
are there kits like this that people make that they sell? Do you sell or share yours?
Yeah, I sell mine. I buy a lot of them as well, especially characters. So, for example, this little character and some of the ones from paintings that I'm gonna be doing in a bit are from Pablo Dominguez. He has some characters, and Jama Jurabev has some characters, and like if you go to our station, you can just search them and look at the licenses that they have. A lot of them just sell them for like freelancers, so you can do your freelance work with those. And it just takes a lot of the technical process out of the table, so you can just concentrate and focus on just creating stuff, which is what you want to end up doing as an artist. And so you can buy them or you can create them. I like to do both. I like to have my own library that I can pull for my own work and clients and all that. But I also buy a lot of them because it does take time to build them. And so, sometimes if I get a client that wants to, create some sort of medieval city, I use part of, or I include the price of maybe some of the assets that I'm going to buy in the price, and that also helps mitigate the income that you're going to get as well. And so yeah, there's a lot of versatility in that process.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit because I have a few questions here regarding the hardware side of things. Talked about the programs you use. I know you use a Cintiq. How much more beneficial is a drawing tablet with a screen over a screenless one, say an Intuos? Do you prefer one over the other for landscape design?
So I got these 24-inch. This is my first Cintiq that I ever had. Before this, I actually had, ever since I started, a Intuos. I think it was like a 6x8 Intuos. So this is like my first Cintiq that I got, and I got this like back in, it was like October or something. It hasn't been 6 months since I got it. So I spent a lot of time and years using Intuos, the Intuos Pro. At the studio that I was before, I had a Dell canvas. But before that, I actually tried the Cintiq first way back, and it was actually hurting my shoulder because of the way I was using it. And I was using it sort of like, I don't know if you can see it, but I was using it like straight vertical like this, and I was like trying to paint like this. And I got a lot of shoulder pain from it because I was just new to it. And I tried it for like a month, and I just couldn't get used to it. So I stuck to my Intuos Pro, and I used that for years. And then we practiced at the studio. I was like, some people had Cintiq, some people had Dell canvas. Little by little, I started getting used to drawing on top of the screen. So I don't use it like this. I actually use it flat on my desk here, and I can actually rest my whole arm on top of it. And that helps mitigate my shoulder pain. And so, yeah, but I think if you have the money to buy, like, you should get it, because it's definitely like, it just feels better to look into where you're painting and the resolution of it and just everything. But again, it's just a tool. So getting a Cintiq will make you a better artist. So either way.
Absolutely. I have seen amazing work done on Intuos, Intuos Pros. And yeah, of course, the feel of drawing on screen is very different, but it's definitely not a guarantee to better work.
Yeah, for sure.
So people want to see you demo your painting, or
Cool.
they want to see the Wacom in action, they say. Well, do we have
Awesome.
some time? Let's see.
Yeah. So I did some renders here. I actually used this set. I just wanted to create something simple, like a little dungeon thing, and I put one of the characters from Pablo Dominguez just to have some scale in there and some story time here. I'm trying to decide whether this one or this one. Maybe we can do both. But one of the cool things about 3D also like helps speed up the painting process is your render passes, and you can choose whichever you want from your render pass screen here. But these will give you different looks and different properties of your render that will help you on your painting process. So for example, this mist layer here helps me push things back and forth from the camera. So I use this one a lot to add atmosphere and separate, distance and that sort of thing. So for example, I can put this on lighten. You can already see that just by doing that, it pushes everything in the background back so it looks further away. But I also like to play with some of the colors, and all this bright stuff I'm definitely gonna paint over because that's not part of the image, but so we can paint these out so we don't need those. And this is gonna be mostly atmosphere stuff in here. You can copy these, play with the levels to separate even more the background from the foreground. You can save these as a selection in a channel, and you can always go back to that selection and use it. I like to duplicate it and invert it so I get both of the ranges.
While you work there, I'm going to ask one of the questions that somebody dropped on the Q&A, but I'm going to ask it to you and people on the chat, because maybe this needs a crowdsourcing answer. Do you trust Turbo Squid for selling or buying work? Turbo Squid. I don't know what that is, but it sounds.
Turbo Squid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a website that hosts 3D models. Yeah, so I have probably 5 different online stores in different sites like Turbo Squid. I don't have one in Turbo Squid, but they're usually pretty, pretty reliable. Like my main store is on ArtStation, and of course I have a Gumroad. There's Cube Brush, Flip Normals, Turbo Squid, and there's other. But if you go in those and you explore and do some research, like you're gonna notice that each one of those has its own niche, and so like some of them are more into like archivists, which is like architectural visualization. So you will see like real life, like interiors and architecture and stuff like that. Some of them are more into like 3D game assets, and you will find all sorts of things in ArtStation that are based like more into like concept art and like real stuff for gaming. So you just have to do your research for that and see which one is gonna fit better. I've tried 5, 6 of those, and with time I know which ones or which sets are gonna sell better or the best in which site. So yeah, I would, if I was on that niche in Turbo Squid, like I would definitely put it up there for sure.
Thank you, Jose. There you have it, chat. trusty website. So people were wondering. So people are wondering if it's possible to do what you're doing in Illustrator.
Oof, you're a brave person if you tried it.
It would take a very long time. And
Yeah.
something you could not do at all.
Yeah, I mean, I see some crazy stuff in Illustrator that I'm like, how does that even? But I can't even think about the process of the, like, I can't even begin to understand it.
Yeah, no. We have a lot of questions about Procreate. So, team, we are Wacom. We love working with software. Apps, we don't really, you've noticed we never had a Procreate webinar. So yeah, pretty sure you can head over to Adobe and ask some Procreate questions. We don't have a lot of answers, but you can ask us about Blender, ZBrush, Photoshop. Manuela is saying you can go between raster and vector with Affinity Designer. Yes, you can. Clip Studio too. Yes, we love Clip Studio Paint. Jose, we gotta get you a copy of Clip Studio Paint so you can try it too.
Yes, absolutely. I'm definitely willing to. Yeah, people at work at my previous studio were always into Clip Studio, and it seems like for painting and sketching and all that, it just feels so much better than Photoshop. That's what I've been seeing, and so definitely would like to try it.
Which software do you use for mountains and terrains? Angelica is wondering.
Oh, so it depends. If I want to be very quote unquote realistic and specific, like if I want to create like a nice mountain range type of thing, I have a work creator, and I can get some like nice displacement maps from there that I can use inside Blender to use as a displacements and play with them. If not, if I don't need like, if I just need to block out an environment like hills and that sort of thing, like I would just, block it out in Blender with like cubes and subdividing them and just moving vertices around just to kind of block it. Especially if I'm gonna like photo batch the details from there. I can just do that in Blender.
Someone is in the chat asking, can you explain what you're doing right now? Because it's a bit confusing with all the layers. Are they in 3D right now, or is this in 2D?
So I'm in Photoshop right now. What I'm doing is using my different render passes that you see here. Mm-hmm. And using them to, separate things. So I can paint behind them and push things back in the camera so that they look like they're far away, and adding atmosphere and that sort of thing. So, I'm still working here in Photoshop. And so right now I am trying to separate the character from everything. That way I can concentrate on just painting behind it. Because as you can see here, I'm getting a weird stuff happening here. That's because that's on this character layer. And so I want to make sure that that doesn't happen as I'm painting it. So I'm sort of like separating the character from everything else right now. And now that I have that, let's make sure. Yep. Now I can paint behind it, and I will get rid of that weird thing going on there.
Can you explain why and how you use those extra layers on the alpha channels?
Oh, yes. So for example, so I use the channels tab for saving selections. So in every image that I do, there's always certain selections that I constantly go back to. For example, in this image, the character is going to be one selection. These foreground pillars are going to be a selection. The division of, let me put it here. The division of the environment from this point back. So all this back here is going to be another selection, and everything in here is going to be another selection. So I use channels for that. And so, for example, if I get my mist render path, which is this, I can duplicate that and play with the levels to create something like this, right? So here, the white is going to be more, when you select it, it's going to be more selectable, and then the black is going to be non-selectable. And so if I control click that layer, it's going to select everything in that layer based on these values. And I copy, control C. And when I do a new channel and I paste that, it's going to paste that information of those values in a channel. So that means that when I select that channel, it's going to have that information of things that are more selected based on the value that it has the channel. So I'll show that to you. So for example, if I control click that channel, let's make a new layer, and I paint everything red, you're going to see that whatever was more white or closer to white is going to have more of that red, like here. And then whatever is dark or black is going to have less because of that selection. And, you know, you don't need to have the gradient part of it. You can just do like, you know, like the character, for example, like you can just paint that white. So every time you control click that alpha, it's going to select everything that's white. So it's going to select the character. And so that gives you more versatility into terms of like separating things and that sort of thing.
Thank you for explaining. That's
No
awesome.
problem. Also, you can use the, like if you get like a normal, this is called a normal render pass. For example, what that does is like every face in the 3D that is facing the same direction will get the same color. So for example, if you see this pillar here, every face that is facing the right has the color red. So I could grab, for example, that color. We can go select similar. You might select those purple ones, but let's reduce the tolerance here and see if that works. Select similar. Let's do it manually. Right, you'll select those, everything that's red because it's facing that way. And let's say I wanted to, just to give you an example here. Let's say I wanted to bring some sort of like ambient light or light coming from the right into this pillar, then I can make that selection and I can paint that up. And because I have that selection, you know, it's only applying it to that side of the pillar. And, you know, if you have a selection that you might go back to this, then you can just, once you have that selection, you can just press the make a new mask. And now you have a mask with that selection. So you can always go back to a selection without having to select everything. And
Oh, that's
all over
great.
again.
Thank you for showing us.
No problem.
Underlay is wondering, how would you go about chromatic colors and lighting?
Chromatic colors?
Yes.
What do you mean?
Underlay, can you elaborate, please? We don't know what you mean. Let's see. How do you use black and white gradient to help add depth to your work?
So let me see if I try to understand. So I'm using the black and white gradient here that you see here, putting that in a channel because the channel will see that as it won't see it as distance. It will see it as how much opacity that selection has. So the lighter it is, the less opacity. So the more selection you're gonna have, and the darker, the less. But these mist render paths that you get from Blender or any rendering 3D software will give you that gradient based on the distance from the camera to the distance, right? So for example, if like I'm here in Blender right now, and if I go to seeing the mist pass here, let's make a quick fix here. See that? So now this is how the mist pass is going to look. So if I render this, I'll get this image, and Blender gives me the information or the gradient based on distance, but then Photoshop gives me the information of selection based on that gradient. So I'm using both of those to give me that ability to put things, you know, in the background or closer, that sort of thing.
All right. Thank you for showing us that. That was really cool.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite render passes. It's like super useful because when you get a render, if you don't have that on in the post-processing of the render, like you will just get this flat image like this one, where everything has the same value range and everything is dark and white depending on your lighting and that sort of thing. So having that to push things and to lessen the contrast as it goes in the distance, but it's very powerful because you don't need to you know, in an environment like, especially if it's moody, you don't need to show everything for the viewer, for the audience to understand what's going on, right? So I don't need to show you every single detail, you know, in here, up here on the architecture and all that, because then you're gonna have areas where are gonna fight for attention, and you know, depending on the contrast, and you know, you want to try to keep the focal point where it should be, and so playing with pushing things back and, you know, eliminating the contrast on some of the things and some of the areas will help you sort of have that area of interest a little bit more in the focal point.
Awesome.
A lot of this stuff need to be covered up by, you know, it could be like a textured brush or something. They can just sort of go over them. And
so these brushes, do you have a favorite brush artist that you buy brushes from? Do you create your own? Can you talk a little bit about your brush?
I have, yes, you can see I have, I mean, I don't even know how many these are, but I use like maybe 5 or 6 of these. And usually it's like this bottom row here. You know, a lot of these textures are very specific. Like, you know, we get this sort of like plant thing that, I mean, I cannot really use it for too many things, but yeah, most of these brushes, I think I have had them for years and years, and I haven't really like updated my my brushes just because I haven't felt the need for it. If I'm becoming in a chance where I need to like something very specific, then I'll create it myself. Like I think I did some I started doing some sort of plant. Let's see if I can do, just to kind of play with like flora and stuff for a piece that I'm working on. But that's just like very specific, and so it's really gonna depend on what I'm working. But I haven't updated my brushes since like forever. It's been quite a long time.
Jose, do you remember your first job as an environment concept artist? Do you remember how you got it?
Yes, I do. So I was in so I was living in Puerto Rico, of course, and it was like November, December 2012. And I got an email from my first freelance job was creating some illustrations for Fantasy Flight games for Warhammer. And they literally just sent an email and they said, you know, I don't remember. I think it was somebody recommended me or they saw my artwork somewhere, probably like DeviantArt or something back in those days. But and they wanted to say if I had time to do some illustrations for that game. And that was like my first, you know, paid job that I think I ever did. And then after that, I did probably about 4 or 5 years work with them. So I have a very long relationship with them. I did cards. I work for, you know, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Arkham. I think I did over 75 illustrations for Lord of the Rings only, which is like one of my favorite IPs ever. And so, yeah, that was like my first. And after that, I just became, you know, I was working three jobs back then. And when I first got that job, I was like, maybe I can do this. And it took me a while. I think it took me maybe 3 years to be full-time as a freelance artist, you know, just to depend on my art. Because the first 3 years I was still working 2-3 jobs that were non-art related, you know, just to pay the bills and just to live. So I think it was after 3 years, I was able to just, I cut my expenses by a lot as well. So that helped a ton. But it took me about 3 years to be full-time freelancer, to live off of my art, at least.
What are, in your opinion, what are some of the things that most artists going into this field are lacking, or something they all have but just maybe hasn't served them well in this field? It's a really interesting question by Micah. What are some of the things that most art students going into this specific field or artwork lack?
First thing that comes into my patience.
Patience.
Yeah. You know, and it's really hard these days because during these times it's like you get everything fast, right? Which is why it goes back to like the first thing that I saw, like your why, why you're doing this. And so let me have a drink of water real quick.
No worries. Confidence too, Angel Falcon is saying patience and confidence.
That's definitely part of it. Yeah. Because I mean, again, this is a skill-based industry, right? And you can only build a skill with time and, you know, putting in the time, right? Another thing is confidence. Like they don't like to show their work, and I've heard like so many different reasons as to why they don't show their work, and none of them are, like, in my eyes, none of them are valid enough to not show your work. The only valid reason why you wouldn't share your artwork is NDA. That's like the only reason that I would think about that I can think of that is, you know, a good enough reason for you not to show your artwork, right? But, you know, share your artwork and it's not that you like, if you're a timid person, or like, you're you're not very outspoken, or you don't like to socialize too much, quote unquote. Like, I used to be like very, very timid. I'm still am, but like, the way I think of it is, it's that I'm thinking about the end goal, not at the moment goal, right? So if the end goal is to be, for me, is to be in the industry, right, and work in the industry, and I'm at a workshop or a convention like CTN or something like that, I'm going to try to talk to as many people as I can, because even though I might be uncomfortable, making that approach, and, I might say things that I didn't like, or my portfolio isn't good enough, quote unquote, or, or you don't like the person or whatever. That's not the angle. The angle is for you to network, meet people, and, get comfortable with being in the industry. And so that reason should trump over, your maybe your shyness, or anything like that. That doesn't mean that you're going to be super outspoken or anything, but you need to be able to reach out to people and be able to talk to people, and that sort of thing. Share your work, whether you think it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. You need to share your work. That's like so important. Yeah, that's what I also, learn your tools, like, be always open to evolve and grow as an artist, because technology doesn't wait for anybody. And so, as soon as something comes, like VR is getting huge right now. And I think VR is gonna be one of those things where it's sort of like gonna take over the pipelines in the future. And so, be always on top of, learning what's happening on the industry, technology base, and softwares that are coming out, and, new ways to do things that took hours to do before. Now it takes, 1 hour or a few minutes, type of thing. So we always on the lookout to keep learning and growing.
There you have it, friends. You gotta be patient. You gotta have confidence, and you gotta keep practicing. I also heard a lot of people give this advice before, and you should also create the portfolio for the job you want to get.
Yes, that is huge. Yeah, be as specific as possible. And I'll tell you a little story. When I was starting out, I went to, I think they still do it, but Imagination Studios, which is run by Bobby and Kay, they run this in-house workshop, and pretty much you apply for it. They choose 4 artists, or at least back then they choose 4 artists, and those artists go to live with them at the house studio in Canada for like a month. And pretty much like an intense workshop where you spend Monday to Friday, 9 to 6, taking classes and working and doing stuff. But you're actually living with them as well. So you get to do all the things like, we went to, the movies, and we hang out and went out and all that stuff. And one of the things that Bobby asked me when we first started was, like, what do you want to be like in the industry? And I was like, I just want to be a concept artist. And, he taught me that I need to be as specific as possible, because the more specific, the more clear you can trace your path to get to that point in specific. And so if you're pretty broad with your statement and your goal, it's going to be very hard to find that path that will lead you to a specific area, right? So that way, in the same way you want to be with your portfolio. So I've created a portfolio for specific jobs for specific companies. For example, I created a specific, like I went to I don't remember the year that it was, but it was a like I'm a huge Blizzard fan, and I went to one of the BlizzCon um, um, conventions just so I could do networking and bring a specific portfolio just for them. And that was my only mission on that trip. Yeah, I was gonna check out the games and hang out and stuff, but the first day or the first 2 days, all I wanted to do is network, show my portfolio, and I did like a specific portfolio for that. And yeah, I didn't get a job, but it led me to a lot of things after that because of that. And I think just having that mindset just helps overall to get your portfolio right.
Thank you for sharing that. Jose, we are nearing the end of our webinar. I'm going to ask just a few more questions before wrapping it up.
Sure.
There's obviously a lot more to talk about. Environment concept design is very, very complex. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of 3D elements to it, and so many tools and softwares that we could, quite frankly, have a whole series about it. So there was never a chance I was going to get through all these questions. So I definitely invite you, and I invite my team to do a second version of this webinar so that we can get into more details and more into the
Yeah, that would be great.
just a lot more into the sculpting aspects. I know there were a lot of questions regarding lighting. There's so much that goes into creating an atmosphere and an environment that relates to light, and we didn't even get to touch on that. So for sure, Jose, we're definitely gonna have to call you back.
Sure, absolutely. I'm all for it.
So one of the last questions I'm going to ask here came earlier. Are there any background cliches or environment cliches that you try to avoid? For example, what would make an environment design look amateur?
Well, the two questions. The first one, no, I don't try to avoid any type of background, quote unquote. Of course, I'll always try to avoid a style that either I don't like or I'm just not familiar with it. I personally don't think anything is like cliche or anything, because to me personally, client work, it's really all about the client, right? So if the client wants a realistic MMORPG type of, environment, that's what I'm gonna give it, because as a client, and that's what they want, right? It's really not up to me what they want. I can only decide that on my own personal work. So on your own personal work, I think you can just do whatever you want to do because it's your work, right? But professionally, like, I definitely work on the things that I like the themes. Like I like a lot of fantasy, sci-fi. Lately I've been diving a little bit more into like more anime-ish type of style, which I like to play around with a little bit, because I'm playing Genshin Impact too much, but that's another subject. Yeah, I usually don't try, like I always keep, if I'm working for a client, I always keep the client or the goals of the client, first over any of my personal, preferences or anything, because it's really not about me at that point. Yeah, I'm making the artwork and I have input on how it should be done and all that, but at the end goal is going to be the client. So the other question was, what was the second question?
It was, what would make an environment design look amateur?
So I think it will come down to the basics of it. So, if you're doing photo batching is a quote unquote easy technique, but it's really not easy, because you can really tell, and this is just an example, you can really tell when a pro uses it and when somebody that is starting uses it. And they probably don't know how to blend those photo textures with the base layer, or they use photo textures that have different types of lighting, so the lighting is all over the place. They don't really have a focal point on the image. Everything is just sort of like super textured, or super blown out with like light when it doesn't make sense. But all those things are like core fundamentals that that gets exposed with whatever technique that you're using, right? So there's no technique that would sort of cover up your inability or ignorance about that subject. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing something, right? Because we don't know everything, right? It's just a constant growth. But little by little, you start tackling those issues, and you understanding and knowing that you have those issues, it's going to be better for you in the long run, so you can tackle them and all that.
Well, there you have it. Go look at all of his work. Jose Vega is online. I believe he goes by the Art of Vega. Is that correct?
Art of Jose Vega, usually, yeah.
So please go support him. He's always, I believe you told me your favorite one is Facebook. That's where you're most responsive. So if you want to network with Jose, please do so. And also, if you want to learn more about digital art and other subjects, every Tuesday and Thursday, we do have Wacom Webinars, so tune in. I want to thank Jose for being such a great host today, teaching us our first concept design, environment concept design webinar. Hopefully we'll bring you back again soon rather than later, so that we can continue to talk about some of the things we didn't get to touch on, like color, and more in depth in the more stylized aspects of concept design. Thank you so much for
That'll be awesome.
For your time, Jose. Any parting words you want to share with our audience?
No, if you have any more questions, like feel free to reach out. I'm usually pretty open to talk to people, especially people that are starting out and stuff. But yeah, feel free to reach out and contact me if you have any issues or concerns.
Thank you so much. And for everybody, we do have a playlist with all of our webinars on our YouTube. We hosted over, I don't know, I guess it was over 100 webinars last year. So please go check some of them out. We have great classes with great pros like Jose teaching us the ins and outs of the softwares in different industries. So please check our playlist on YouTube and tune in next week for more webinars. I'm your host, Elizabeth Garcia, and Tom, this is a wrap. We are done for today.
See you guys.
Thank you.